Okay, in this tutorial here, it's still section 1.5, and I'm going to derive right from scratch to show you how I got the values for unit in the unit circle. Now, what you're going to need for references is you're going to need the chart of the sine, cosine, and tan values for 30 degrees, 45, 60, 90, and 0 degrees, and that's on page 29. And you're also going to need to know the signs that happen in each quadrant. So what you start with is you start with drawing your Cartesian plane. And I find it helpful to use an actual triangle that has 30 degrees on it. This is a 30, 60, 90 degree triangle. So what I'm going to do in the first quadrant here is I'm going to put this right along here like this, right along the axis, and this will give me a 30 degree reference angle in the first quadrant. Don't really worry about the length at this point. And then here I could do the same thing over here in the second quadrant. .30-degree angle, and then in the third quadrant, whoops, let's line it up right there. And in the fourth quadrant, we can line it up as well. So this is how I start by drawing the stuff for the unit circle. So I'm just going to try and get that to line up nicely. See, it's a little bit of a, I got to give it a little bit there because it's not a sharp point on my triangle. Okay, so that gives me a little bit better of a reference point when I'm looking there. Now, what you do once you got the 30 degrees ones is you write them in. Okay, so we know that this is obviously 30 degrees. Okay, that's 30 degree reference angle. What is that in radians? That's pi over 6. Okay, continuing on to this one. If this is 30 degrees, this next angle here is at the 150 degree mark. Even though this is a reference angle, we have to do the positive angle. So it's 150 degrees. Okay, if we look at the 150 degrees in terms of radians, that's 5 pi over 6. Okay, and that we can just calculate that using our relationships. 180 equals pi radians. Okay, and then if we go to the third one here, it's 180 plus 30, that's 210 degrees. And if we look at that in terms of the relationship as radians, that's 7 over 6 pi radians. Okay? And finally, the last one, it would just be 30 degrees minus from 360. This would be 330 degrees. Or if we want to do the pi radian relationship for that one, just be one less there, so it would be 11 pi over 6 radians. Okay, so now we have our values. Now all we have to do now is, I would recommend now putting a certain length in there for each so that you can draw kind of a circle now. So what I'll do is I'll make them all 6 centimeters long. So I'm just going to put my point there at 6 centimeters along each of the lines. You don't have to do it exactly like that, but I'm not doing a scale diagram, but I'm just trying to make it look neat. So I'm trying to make it reasonable by using, so now we have to calculate each of these points, the x and y points. And our reference angle in this case is always 30 degrees. So what we have to do then is look at page 29 in our book and find 30 degrees, or if you like, pi over 6 radians, and find out what cosine is. Now cosine is root 3 over 2. So cosine always comes first. So this point is root 3 over 2. The second point is sine, and that's 1/2, so that's the second point. And if we wanted to find tan, tan would be root 3 over 3. And we could put that out here if we want, but we just want to find these 2 points right now. Both are positive because they're in the first quadrant, x and y. Do the same here. It's going to be the same numbers always, root 3 over 2 and 1/2, except the signs will change depending on the quadrant. Here we have the x point being negative, so this has to be negative. Here we have the same thing, except we know that the x and the y point are negative in this case, so we put negatives in front. And again here for this one. Oops, the x is not negative this time, it's the y that's negative only in the fourth quadrant. So there is how you find those points on your unit circle. Okay, and don't forget, I forgot to put this one in. That's our 330 degrees. So now if I drew the unit circle in here, I can kind of I can't do it by that. I have to send eyeball it. Okay, it's not the best circle I've drawn in my life. But it gives you an idea how to obtain the points on the unit circle using your information from the special triangles and what you know about quadrants. And that kind of conclude, there are some questions in the section, but they're basically just knowledgeable type questions. The real important thing is we didn't do the 60-degree ones, but we can also do that, how we derive the 60-degree ones if you want as well. But I probably did those in class. But the real important thing is to remember what that unit circle looks like. I would fill one completely out and have it as a reference to look at as you work through a lot of the next sections, chapter 2, 3, and 4 of this course. So that concludes chapter 1's tutorials, and we'll start off with chapter 2 in the next tutorials.